Welcome back to the Mixology Talk Podcast. I'm Chris, and my better half, Julia, is off this week because I have an exciting interview for everyone today. But together, Julia and I operate abarabove.com and Top Shelf Bar Supplies. So if you're looking for some great articles focused on craft bartending, some techniques, or even your career, check out the website abarabove.com. Now, if you're looking for some professional bar tools, definitely check out our sister company, Top Shelf Bar Supply, at topshelfbarsupply.com, or you can find us on Amazon as well. This is episode number 147 of the Mixology Talk Podcast, and this week we have an interview with Camper English. That's right, the Ice King himself. But we're not going to be talking about ice. We will be talking about the launch of his new website, cocktailsafe.org. Now, if you've ever wondered if certain ingredients are safe to include in your beverage program, this is going to be a great resource for you to start your research. So without further ado, here's our interview with Camper English. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Mixology Talk Podcast. I'm excited to have a special guest interview here, the Ice King himself, Camper English. So thank you, Camper, for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So for anybody that doesn't know Camper English, I would say, single-handedly the person responsible for directional freezing and clear ice as far as beverage programs go. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
For the home scaled up bartender, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. But you've been a part of this community culture, and you've really helped kind of craft this industry for a long time. I know that when I was first starting out in like 2003, you were one of the only blogs out there. You, I think Darcy O'Neill, what's his name? Jamie Boudreau, I think, was doing a couple things.
Right. Jeffrey Morgan Taylor was blogging at the time.
And that was about it.
A couple of rum people.
A couple rum guys, right. Yeah. I think Rick Dobbs was doing a blog back then.
Martini Groove.
That's right. Called. Yeah. But it really did help kind of get awareness out for the craft cocktail movement and really kind of put a spotlight on people all over the country doing cool stuff. So from all of us, and especially me, thank you for all the work over the years that you've done for the community. Definitely appreciate it. So the main reason we have you on here is to talk about a new website that you just launched, right?
Yes.
So cocktailsafe.org. This is something I'm excited that is a resource for our bartender community. But can you kind of talk a little bit about the actual website?
Sure. Cocktail Safe is a website about safety in ingredients and techniques commonly used in the professional bar setting, but somewhat in the home bar setting as well. It's hopefully a useful tool for both, although the more adventurous mixologist will be the one who will come up against some of the ingredients and techniques. So what it is basically an index of techniques and ingredients that may or may not be dangerous or safe. And people can use the website to check in on something because, as it turns out, there's kind of a lot of bad information out there, as well as I think an important point about the bartending community is largely a lot of the education is word of mouth.
Sure.
We learn from talking to other people, but also sitting at other people's bars, etc., without a whole lot of formalized, there's still not really a degree in bartending. There are lots of different programs, but not everyone's on the same page.
Sure.
And the people who've been in it the longest went through it without anything. So that leaves the door open for the possibility of making mistakes. And we all make mistakes. We've all done it. I've certainly served drinks in non-food safe containers and silly things like that. One time I muddled a house plant into a cocktail just to see. It was early. Muddling was big.
Things happen. Absolutely.
Yeah. Did not taste good, that one.
Yeah.
And so the website is really there as a resource about the actual things we know that are dangerous, and then some inquiries into things that may or may not be, such as a lot of foreign foraged material and plants like that I think people in the cocktail world, like figure like the forest is fair game. Like we know you can't just pick any mushroom, but like, oh, you can stick any flower in your drink, and
Right.
perhaps that's not always a good idea.
Right. And working in the fine dining for a while, I've met a couple mushroom hunters. They're usually a little bit strange. I'm going to go ahead and call that out. So, but to your point, there's a lot of things out there that can be extremely harmful. And without the right knowledge, I think it's really important that, we kind of focus on this as an industry. So before we kind of go down this road a little bit more, but kind of like to get your history, like what got you into writing about spirits and writing about bartending, aspects of bartending in particular?
Well, I started back when I had full-time jobs in science and then in programming. I was club trash. I was going out a lot, drinking cocktails a lot, and got interested. So I started writing on the side for fun about bars and nightclubs.
Okay.
I was laid off from a programming job in 2001, along with half of everybody. And I started then writing more seriously, and eventually, who knew, I became a full-time writer.
Mm-hmm.
And really about 2006 is when I saw the craft cocktail movement as we know it today hit a critical mass of bars that were open, and realized I could just talk to that audience of bartenders and consumers of those beverages and make that my focus, not so much on who the DJ was, but really just the cocktails and how they're made and what the ingredients are. And so I've taken a little bit of my science background, well, I guess it's a lot of it now, into the cocktail space. As things progressed and people became different specialty writers, some people focus on rum, some on whiskey, some on molecular mixology, I got interested in the science of cocktails and spirits. Why do things taste the way they do? And then later, I guess the downsides of the individual ingredients. So that was the evolution there. But I've been writing about drinks for it feels like a very long time now.
Yeah, and it's funny, like one of the first times you and I met, I think you did an open roll call to see who was available in San Francisco to help with a water project that you were doing. You were doing a bunch of different chemicals to do kind of a water sample of different reservoirs throughout the country or throughout the world, and how that affected spirits. I think that was the first time I actually met you. And it's funny, we're talking about safety and all that stuff. You had a lot of single compounds, like magnesium and stuff like that. And we would put it out on a table and, taste it with water and all that stuff. And I remember early in my career, I was like, you know what? I like to see on both sides of the spectrum if it's a little bit what it tastes like and what a lot of it tastes like. And I remember that I took a lot of more chemicals than I probably should have. So knowing myself now, I'm kind of like, why would you do that? But yeah, it kind of ties in the whole thing about cocktail safety. It probably was not a good idea.
Yeah, why just like experimentation with anything that you sort of heard of without really checking into like how much crosses a line into being dangerous,
right?
Or
exactly.
a really bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very easy for people to do, especially when you're consuming it yourself. Like, oh, I'll be fine. A little bit, I'll totally be okay. But, when you're starting to serve the public, that's where things can get even more serious. And, the last thing we want to do is make any of our customers sick. So,
right. There's a difference between poisoning yourself and poisoning another person.
Right. And the liability that goes along with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bars can get shut down, lose their liquor license, all of these negative consequences,
right.
In addition to actually harming a person who's not yourself.
Right, absolutely. So how did this whole project start with the cocktailsafe.org? What was kind of the catalyst that was made this project possible?
Well, really a few years ago, there was a really big incident that probably was the start of me thinking about this stuff, in that a woman in the UK was served a shot for her 18th birthday and the trick was they were bubbling with liquid nitrogen, and the drink still had liquid nitrogen in it, and she did the shot and had to go to the emergency room and have her entire stomach removed. Which,
oh, wow.
I didn't really know was possible, that you could have to have your stomach taken out.
Right.
sort of like a gastric bypass, but for this irresponsible action a bartender had done by giving her a drink with the stuff in it. So that's one thing that really leapt on my radar. And then I'd seen other cases of tobacco, which in beverages, which is still going on today, and then some other just here and there safety things like homemade amaretto, and in recent years, homemade tonic water syrup,
Sure.
and these days activated charcoal. And I'm sure we'll get into all these individually, but as they sort of started to stack up, that there were more and more things to be aware of, or seemingly new and fun bartending tools that could result in accidents, I started trying to make that a little bit more of my focus. And
Sure.
I pitched seminars at the Tales of the Cocktail seminar. And actually it wasn't until the third year of pitching it that I actually got the seminar. The first year I had the seminar, but no sponsor. The second year, the seminar was not accepted. And then third year, it was accepted again, and I did get a sponsor and was able to give a talk. And that was co-led by Avery Glasser of Bitterman's Bitters, who's been another very strong and very smart voice in the sort of cocktail safety movement.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you guys have, there's a Facebook group too, that is a part of this conversation about safety around ingredients and stuff too. Is that correct?
There is, but it's a private Facebook group, okay. So it's not really public. It's for bartenders, like definitely not for media, because what Avery does with the group is he wants people to be able to debate and to admit to mistakes without worrying about liability or something like that. So it's a group from which I pulled a lot of the information that then I was able to fact check and put on the website Cocktail Safe. And Avery also helped as an advisor on the website a little bit, where I'm like, I don't know exactly how to put this thing, or do you think it's this or that? So he's been very important in this as well, and one of the major voices in safety awareness in the mixology space.
Absolutely. And I'm a member of that group as well. And I will say it's a really great safe space for people to kind of bounce ideas off of and just get a different perspective on ingredients and stuff. So, it's definitely a great resource for bartenders. To your point, you don't want a lot of people in there poking around and, pulling quotes out from Facebook and all that stuff. So it's good that it is strictly bartender focused. And I think there's a filter to even get in, right? Like,
there is. And
good.
It's to make sure that everyone is there for the good of it, even though there's some, sassiness in the group and some rants and things like that you may have noticed. But and then Cocktail Safe is really like the more formalized site to go. Right now, I don't have any comments turned on, but I have started a Google group associated with it that no one's used so far. But there will be a place for more questions and answers types of things.
Perfect. Excellent. Now, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but for the website Cocktail Safe, you pull a lot of the information from this particular group that we're talking about. But is there any other place you kind of pull some data and information from as well?
Yeah, absolutely. From anything from medical journals to a lot of time I spent on the FDA, the US FDA website, and the TTB website to see what's legal, because there's really two things going on for a lot of the safety stuff: is what is safe and what is legal. And often things are meant to be illegal because they're unsafe. And sometimes the studies that got something, got the law changed around an ingredient may not have been the best, and we're like, how unsafe is sassafras to use? Like, I'm not qualified to really say. I just know the government has made it illegal. Seems like maybe that was one of the conservative decisions, but in any case, it's illegal. So I think it's good for people to know to not go forward with ingredients like that. So those government websites were a lot of the research that I did on those. The website is US focused for now, sort of phase one. And then I hope to increase with some of the legal rulings in Europe and Canada and other places as time goes on, when I get time to build it. And then for a lot of it, it was just putting in Google, like name of ingredient plus safety or plus danger, and then seeing where that led me. Sometimes the information was readily accessible, and sometimes it was really, really hard to find.
Sure. So this is not a bunch of blog posts pulled together. This is some credible, serious data-driven information about safety. So if that's something that people are looking for, you can kind of rest assured that it's not like me or somebody else writing a blog post.
I had to ignore a lot of websites that were like very much like holistic websites, and this herb is good for burning to get money or whatever, like sort of shamanistic websites, because a lot of the ingredients, particularly the herbs and spices and things used in a lot of homemade, say, bitters, have all these kind of hippie uses, and those websites were not a great source of information. So I've done the labor of trying to trace back to the science of those to get what I felt was a reliable answer.
Sure. Yeah. And this is something that I've seen in my career as well, as going into like a herb shop or some place that sells all these essences and all that, and just kind of start to talk to them. And it becomes very clear very quickly that they don't really understand. Like there's not a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of like, oh, my friend uses it for this thing and it's great and he's totally fine. There's nothing that says, you can have 32 parts per million or, 1 drop per 1 liter of vodka to kind of mellow it out. There was never any science like that. So I always kind of step back from their help and their advice.
And one big aspect to all this safety that I think is the most helpful for people to keep in mind is that there are approved for food safety ingredients, and then there are not. And a lot of the herb shops, like, it's San Francisco, of course, we have a local witch store, and with a lot of stuff that is not food safe because it's meant for more potpourri and smudge and hexes and things like that. For some ingredients, the distinction between one and the other is actually very, very crucial and important. One of those is calamus, which is found in a lot, like most old bitters recipes, and in like homemade recipes for Campari and things like that. And it's a nice smelling sort of grass. And in the U.S., it's completely banned for food use. In other countries, it's not banned; it's controlled. You can use it as long as you have a maximum level of the beta acerone that's in it. That's the part that people are worried about. But the calamus that you generally find available for sale is not the food safe one. It's definitely the dangerous one, and it's meant for potpourri, and it's not for consumption. So one of the cool thing was the day there was a New York Times story about Cocktail Safe that came out, and the very same day there was a bartender in Canada who said he was about to go to the store to buy the ingredients for his homemade bitters, and it included calamus, and he rethought that. And then the next day, someone on somewhere else in Europe found the same thing. So that was like an immediate help, I think.
Right, absolutely. Already made a big change in 2 people serving cocktails times however many guests they get through their door. That's pretty great. It's always rewarding to hear that, I'm sure.
Totally. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It's not just for self-aggrandization, but it's because I felt there was a need for this. And one thing I guess we should mention, that the website was made possible with a grant from the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation.
Right.
They had a new grant program that they offered for people doing things that would help the bartending community, and I applied for one and got it. This was all after the seminar that Avery and I gave a year or two after this grant system came up, and it makes total sense for them to support and for to exist, I guess.
Sure. No, congratulations on that too. I think, there was a handful of other grants in there as well, right?
Yes. Things on safety and sexual harassment in the bar communities and things like that. They're doing some good stuff with the grants already.
Yeah, absolutely. So along the process, you did a lot of research into some common ingredients that are being used behind bars and bitters and, beverage programs all over the world. Was there anything that really kind of surprised you? You're like, holy cow, this is kind of a ubiquitous ingredient. I had no idea could potentially have dangerous side effects.
Well, I guess I knew about a few of them that I wasn't that surprised. I was surprised at how low the threshold could be when something can slip into danger. And that includes homemade tonic syrup, which is made, quinine is the active chemical, but it comes from a tree bark, cinchona. And the name of the condition of having too much cinchona is cinchonitis. And we've actually known members of the bartending community who've had an overdose of cinchona, of quinine. And the symptoms, a lot of them sound just like a hangover, like a ringing in the ears and terrible headache, but also muscle soreness and some very unique features. And now I've spoke with at least a couple people who've come down with those conditions. And I think mostly from testing recipes over and over and over again as a bartender or spirits producer. But what pushed one person over the limit was a drink that he was served at a bar. And then he and his wife woke up the next day with all the symptoms of cinchonitis.
Wow.
And, other people have definitely suffered from it, whether they knew it was that condition or not. And we found furthermore, there are some MDs who've actually contributed to the website, digging in a little bit deeper into information about cinchona and activated charcoal, which is another ingredient we'll talk about. But and that there is a certain type of heart condition that could be impacted at a level at which people are using the homemade tonic syrup on a regular basis. And it's rare, but it's possible, and going way above the limit of how much you should put in a drink could actually cause a serious heart complication for some people. Because some of the components of that cinchona bark are actually used to treat heart conditions. Right.
Well, and this is the thing that I've realized with the bitters in particular is that these can be medicinal. I mean, this is where a lot of medicines are actually extracted from. So without really knowing the levels that you're playing with, you could do some pretty serious harm. So this just kind of points in that same direction of just.
Yeah. Most of this stuff started as medicine.
Right.
Like all bitters started as medicine, unless they started in the last 20 years. They were originally either for soothing your stomach or preventing malaria and many other conditions. So anything medicinal is usually concentrated. And then when we go hog wild with things, then we can run into too much of a good thing, I suppose.
Right. Absolutely. Now you mentioned activated charcoal, because I know this has been a concern over the last couple of years, because it produces a really beautiful black cocktail, which is is very dramatic, very eye catching. But for the most part, there was not a lot of conversation early on about the safety of it all. And then all of a sudden you started hearing these conversations starting to boil up and saying, hey guys, we don't really know a lot about this stuff. Let's hold off. And then now it's a full blown conversation about kind of the merits, or not actually the merits of it, but the harms that it can have if you have too many of these drinks. Could you kind of talk a little bit about kind of some of the dangers about it?
Sure. Well, activated charcoal, it's porous is the wrong word, but it traps. You can think of it like fly paper. It traps compounds and molecules within it, because it has the activation of it increases the surface area, and molecules get stuck to it. So in, say, drug overdoses at hospitals, people are given activated charcoal to trap what someone has overdosed on, not alcohol, but poisons, and then those poisons won't reach the person's bloodstream. They're trapped to the charcoal and then excreted out eventually before they get to the bloodstream. So the main concern with activated charcoal is that they will disactivate the drugs that we want, such as medications that someone would be on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dose dependent, and then how recently you may have taken that medicine before going to a cocktail bar. And there are a lot of unknowns, or a lot of factors that we can't say, like, in all cases, activated charcoal is going to wipe out any medication in your system. But we can say that it turns a cocktail black. It's a thing for Instagram. There are alternatives that we could use that don't have these side effects necessarily. So in the exploration of that ingredient, it was really interesting. And because there's some association with detox movements, most of which are kind of bunk, but as far as people doing different detox cleanses and things like that, there's sort of this air of healthiness around activated charcoal,
right,
where it might be a little bit of the opposite. So the website, we hope, can inform the people on, all right, what it is, but then also, like, here are some other ways to achieve the same thing with a less dangerous ingredient.
Yeah, I mean, the anecdotal stories that I heard about activated charcoal, the one that kind of really caught my attention was obviously the medication side of things, but also birth control.
Right.
I mean, you take birth control, you go out for a cocktail bar, 9 months later, you're like, whoa,
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly, but, just the side effects of this are unknown. But it seems like the evidence is definitely pointing in the right direction. Like,
yeah, we know for sure that's what it does. It does a great job at adsorbing medicine and deactivating it. So, the majority of the people coming to a bar to have the cocktail, they won't probably have had the medication within the time limit to the effect. But also, that a person going into a bar shouldn't have to worry about that. They know maybe they have they can't have grape juice because of known drug interactions.
Right.
They would then see grape juice listed on the menu and know to not order that. Activated charcoal, I think, because it's just come into popularity in recent years, that no one's thinking about that as far from a consumer. So why not just avoid that situation is some of the conclusion there.
Right. And you mentioned alternatives to achieve the same kind of effect. Is there one in particular that really works out for cocktails?
Well, anything from just plain old food coloring that you can buy, because if the only job of the activated charcoal is to turn it black, well, then there's something that does that directly, as well as black sesame seeds can be used and ground up. And there was
I heard fish oil, or not squid ink.
Squid ink, yes, / cuttlefish ink. Usually it's cuttlefish, from what I understand. We just call it squid ink. But yeah, that's a very popular way to turn cocktails black, and it has an almost identical color to activated charcoal. One bar in San Francisco was using activated charcoal, and I alerted them to that, and they switched it out, and it looked exactly the same color. So it was really no impact, except for vegetarians like me who would then no longer drink the drink.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that. That's great. Now, are there any ingredients that are pretty popular? I think we touched on a couple of them earlier on, but are kind of fairly common in craft cocktail movement that should raise alarm bells. Like, if you see it on the menu, you should be a little bit cautious of.
For sure. I mean, tobacco is the number one, I think, the number one danger in our whole industry if it's used in the cocktail situation, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, when you smoke a cigarette or a cigar, a very small amount of the overall nicotine gets into the smoker's system. Whereas particularly infused into alcohol, you're getting like all of it. You're getting so much extraction of everything bad in there as well. So a lot of people say, well, I'm using organic cigar tobacco. I'm like, okay, but nicotine is still literally, it's an insecticide. It's a poison. It's really powerful stuff. And though most bartenders are using only a drop or two in bitters for flavoring, that's still not okay. In the first place, it's completely illegal to sell or give away samples of tobacco in bars in the United States. There's licensing to be able to sell, but that doesn't translate into, for any way I can find, that it would be legal to put that in a food or beverage in a legal way. And the government cares very much about that. Yeah. So it's something to avoid. And also, the impacts can be very strong in a very small amount. A bartender I saw writing a post on Facebook who said, "This very thin, short woman, so low body weight. Like, every time I have these tobacco cocktails, I get sick. I don't know what's wrong with me." I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something very wrong with the places you're drinking. So. You can feel the impact at really low levels of that nicotine infusion early on, before we were really thinking about this stuff intelligently. A bartender I knew in the Pacific Northwest made a tobacco-infused bourbon without thinking about it and tried just a little bit, and couldn't move for many hours. And in retrospect, he said, I really should have gone to the hospital. That could have actually, it was definitely heart palpitations that were happening, but it's like, I should have gone to the hospital. That would have been the more mature thing to do. So tobacco is, I think, the largest danger. Mm-hmm. And you and I were talking before the interview officially started about, where was this going?
Well, we're talking about homemade amaretto. We're talking about a couple other ingredients too that are commonplace that probably shouldn't be.
For sure. But I was going to comment on the the word of mouth spread of information in the cocktail world, in that there are still tobacco bitters, a lot of cocktail menus around, and they tend to be less in the large cities with strong bartender interaction, and more we'd see in going into the other regional cities. And it's usually the top selling drink is the tobacco old fashioned, and because they've seen someone else doing it, and just like, okay, then I'll repeat that. And that's something we need to be concerned with as bartending community, which I hope if we can reach them with Cocktail Safe, and if we can help inform everybody. And what I hope that consumers do, as well as other bartenders, is if you see something, there's a nice way to go about telling your bartender to really look into it. And that's now easy to point someone to Cocktail Safe and be like, oh, hey, I read that there's a danger. Or you can just send an email, which I think is the best way. Like, oh, you might not know this, but, rather than the antagonistic approach being like, you are so dumb doing this thing wrong. Right. Nobody likes to be told that. And there's sort of, I think, a natural defensiveness that a lot of bartenders go through when they get called out on this stuff, which makes them lock in place and keep going. It hasn't killed anybody yet, which I think is a terrible excuse for almost anything. Right. There's an easy and polite way to inform someone to look into it. I tend to send bars like a direct link to Cocktail Safe, saying like, hey, I noticed this on the menu. Here's a link with some information about it. It's a matter of concern, and it's also illegal in the case of tobacco.
Right. Well, and this is something that we kind of touched upon offline before we started the interview as well, is the consequences of this. Like if somebody kind of just puts their fingers in their ears and doesn't really do their due diligence as far as researching safety and cocktail ingredients and stuff. I mean, there's some pretty significant consequences that can come from this.
Absolutely. So when that case came with the liquid nitrogen in the UK
Mhm.
years ago, of course the bar got a huge fine, and surprisingly, I don't think they shut down. But there was a big, it blew up in the news, and
I
all the
remember
bars
hearing
were
about it. I read the article about that. Yeah.
and bars were really put on alert. And there weren't too many places in the U.S. at the time using liquid nitrogen like that, at least not that I know
Hmm.
of. But the real concern is if someone dies or goes to the hospital for a tobacco overdose from a cocktail, and that becomes sensationalized in the news, that the consequences can be a complete clampdown on any sort of homemade ingredients in the bar situation. The consequences could be huge and kind of shut down the whole thing we've been doing over the past 10 and 15 years of our crafted homemade ingredients to improve the offerings for the customers could go away into everything has to come from a commercial product in a bottle. That would be a lot less fun, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is something that actually happened in San Francisco within our time. I remember the clampdown on infusions
Yes.
that happened, and it was literally overnight. I know one bar got raided and they had to dump out all their infusions, and then every bar in the city was like, whoa, what's going on? And that was just for simple infusions. Like I was using a jalapeno infusion, and all of a sudden I had to completely rework my entire cocktail menu just to stay above board. But I mean, if this happened in a national level or got national attention, this would absolutely be a game changer for our industry. And not to mention, the last thing we want to do is to harm anybody and, make anybody sick based off of what we're trying to do is, customer service or hospitality. That kind of goes against our entire culture and what we're trying to achieve. But
for sure. It's bad hospitality to kill your guests.
You're not going to get a lot of regulars.
Sticking to that.
But yeah, it's serious. It has happened to a certain degree already. Not so much because of safety, but because of other
legality
laws and stuff. And yeah, absolutely. But this is a real possibility. And, all it would take is a little bit of research on our end to self-police, this community, to make things safe for our customers, so this is never an issue, and we can continue having fun, playing around with all these cool ingredients, and really elevating the craft of craft bartending and mixology, if you will. Other than that, are there any other kind of ingredients that really caught your eye, or kind of like?
Sure. Some other things that we've seen coming used. Some are techniques. So liquid nitrogen is showing up a lot, and obviously liquid nitrogen is very cold and can cause burns to the bartender. This is generally like a concern for the bartenders to prevent injuries. Well, I say obviously you would never serve liquid nitrogen to a customer, but it's happened. But as more bars are using it to chill glassware and add some razzle dazzle to drink, and because of the word of mouth influence that the bartenders have to other bartenders, there's a chance that there could be a mistranslation that liquid nitrogen will get sort of served over the bar, or allowed a customer to touch a container that has held liquid nitrogen and their skin could freeze to it, etc. So there are some, I think, helpful hints on liquid nitrogen handling. I hope that anyone who's actually buying liquid nitrogen would require safety information from the provider wherever they can. I just included some shortcut information on cocktail safe for people to be aware of. That's one technique or tool to use. Another one is fat washing that some people, I think a lot of people think, don't worry, it's got alcohol in it. That kills all germs. Right. And it doesn't unless you're looking at like 96% pure alcohol or something, hand sanitizer in a hospital setting. Yeah, that kills germs, but you don't drink it. But fat washing is, as you know, the technique where we might infuse either fat or fatty meat, sometimes oils, into alcohol, and then freeze it to remove the fatty item, giving the alcohol the sort of remainder of that flavor at the end. But we've seen some cases where people are using some meat in the fat wash and then leaving that to infuse on the counter rather than in the freezer and refrigerator. And that's one thing we just want people to be aware of, that like if you wouldn't leave the meat there, then you definitely don't want to leave your infusion there.
Right.
I guess that goes for any infused ingredients, really. There's could be concerns of botulism. If you are using a kegged cocktail and that had a fat wash in it, and then you have to worry about all the lines what this is traveling through and what happens when that's sitting there hitting air and the threat of problems that could happen there. That's one thing I wanted to make people aware of.
Perfect. Now, was there anything else, or was that the big ones that you've seen, the kind of the most common fads, trends, techniques that we're seeing in the industry?
I think, well, one thing that I'm willfully ignoring, I guess, for now is a marijuana THC.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you went there.
Yeah, because it seems states and municipalities have different laws. I know in California, you basically can't serve or allowed to be consumed cannabis products and alcohol in the same place. So not only can you not serve CBD cocktails with alcohol, you can't allow like marijuana vaping in your bar. And they made that clear. And I think that was to try to get ahead of safety on that. And I've seen some other states have similar legislation. They're just like, hold up, like let's figure this out, what the real interactions are there. I'm no expert on the combination of the two and really what the effects are. And I guess it's my job to be err on the side of caution
right.
With that, but I'm going to build out the website to link to better sources of information on that rather than to try to tackle it myself, because we have to look at what's legal and then what's safe. And those the safety stuff is probably a few years away. We need to better study. Now that marijuana has become legal in a lot of the places, we need to study its interaction with alcohol before we should be serving it to anybody.
Yeah, and I'm actually really glad you covered this, because this is something that on my end, just kind of looking through, cocktail bars and stuff like that, people want to jump on this because it's new. It's a trend. Marijuana has been a part of our culture for a long time, whether legally or illegally. And people just kind of like really want to be the first person out there. It causes a buzz. It gets publicity. It gets people in your bar. I get all that. But to your point, we don't know anything about the safety of this stuff. I think there was a couple of bars in San Francisco that launched CBD cocktails, and like a year ago or so, I was like, I think we should kind of just chill on this, because first of all, the legality of it. I mean, this is like cutting edge. This is right at the frontier of, customer service, hospitality. So I think that, doing our due diligence, doing research, getting the medical community as part of this conversation is really, really vital as far as public safety goes.
A lot of people, as you say, they're really jumping the gun, and it makes the news and it makes the Instagram and all of that. Things that we enjoy about this whole thing, being the first to come up with a crazy idea. Like fat washing was like what when that first came out, and now it's used in all sorts of like exciting ways, peanut butter and jelly fat wash, things like that. And so I think the conservative is a bit of a reminder to like pause, look into something before dumping it into a cocktail.
Sure.
It might be a safety issue. It might be a legal issue. And with marijuana, cannabis products, it might be both. And that depends on where you are, etc. But it's one thing to mix your own substances at home, and another to serve that to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't thank you enough for your time and joining us on a podcast. I don't think you've been on the podcast before, and I'm really kind of
I don't
kicking
think so.
myself. Yeah, so I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the website and kind of opening up some ideas for other bartenders to take a look at and maybe even do their own research. Now, is there anything that you want to kind of promote on your end? Anything you're working on that you'd like to kind of get some more eyes on?
Well, I mean, I hope that people will go to Cocktail Safe and share that on your personal social media, etc. websites. That's really helpful to bring. The more links there are to it, the higher the Google ranking, and the more easily people will be able to find the website in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that people will, if they see something, to send a polite note to the bar from the website saying, like, hey, I saw something about this. Here's the information to use to make make your own decision for the betterment of everybody. And I think that's about it for me.
Great. Well, so if anybody wants to kind of like interact with you or follow you on social media, do you have a favorite platform that you kind of gravitate towards?
I like them all. I'm on, my home website, I guess, my blog that goes back all those years is alcademics.com. cocktailsafe.org. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Alcademics, and on both of those. And I use those all a little bit differently because I think it's fun. And I'm really easy to find on the internet.
Yeah, you have a very distinct name as well. And then, of course, your personal Facebook. I imagine if anybody wants to friend you.
Well, I'm bumping up against that friend limit, but yeah, I'm there.
Nice. Perfect. So yeah, we'll have links to all those resources in the show notes. Definitely cocktailsafe.org, Alcademics, and all the social media handles that you talked about. Now, is there anything you're working on in the near future that you're super excited about? I know every year Tales comes around. You have a couple seminars stewing up there.
Yeah, well, we haven't got the final acceptance for the Tales of the Cocktails seminar yet. I have 3 in play, and I don't know which, if any, will be officially accepted. I can mention the ideas, I suppose. One's about playing with the ABV and drinks raising and lowering to make different cocktails. Another one is about allergy safety. So that's related to Cocktail Safe. And I think there's a ways we can go at better labeling of cocktail menus for that. And then the third seminar, I don't remember offhand what it is. So you might see me at Tales of the Cocktail and a few other conferences. I'm going to try to be on the road a bit, teaching about Cocktail Safe as much as possible.
Great. And also you launched a book a couple of years ago, correct?
Yes, I have a self-published book on the gin and tonic and the history of the gin and tonic. And that's a fun little thing. I still have some copies left for sale on Alcademics. Pick one up before they're gone.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, I have a copy at my house and definitely recommend it for anybody to read. It's definitely a good read. So once again, Camper, thank you so much for your time and thank you for the work on Cocktail Safe and Alcademics. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again.
Yep, hope so.
All right, cheers.
Cool, cheers.
So thanks again to Camper English for his time and also for creating and starting cocktailsafe.org. It's going to be a valuable resource for our community and it allows us to be a lot more safe and kind of self-regulating so we can continue having fun behind the bar. Now all the links that we talked about will be included in the show notes over at mixologytalk.com/147. Now if you're looking for some great bar tools, I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but definitely check out our sister company, Top Shelf Bar Supply, at topshelfbarsupply.com, or you can find us on Amazon as well. Now these are great bar tools created from many years of frustration with some of the bar tools that I was working with behind the bar. So hopefully we helped alleviate some of those for you guys. So we'll have some more podcasts for you in the future, but until then, cheers everyone.